I'd like to get back to the whole subject of previous discussions where we talked about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and some of the challenges that it was facing, and in particular the big conference that was held some months ago, where they brought in theological scholars and prelates and all the elite of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to exchange ideas and put forth papers and policies and discussions on a variety of themes. And one of them was the role of the church vis-a-vis Ukrainian nationalism. And in fact, I believe one of the speakers, the subject of the talk was how the Orthodox Church has got to disabuse itself from nationalism. And he was making, I think, a very valid point, one that goes all the way back, I think, to the earliest foundations of Christianity, and in fact to the teachings of Jesus Christ, when he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God. In other words, he propounded that there should be I guess a distinction between what constitutes religious action and religious thought and what constitutes political action and political thought. And unfortunately, in the case of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, in fact, even on a more broad basis, the Orthodox Church in general, this has been very problematic. And you have to kind of look upon the Ukrainian situation as a kind of a unique state of affairs, in that for most of its existence, Ukraine was constantly being beset, and in fact most of its history was controlled by outside powers, be it the Poles, the Turks, the Russians, the whatever. And they were basically subjugated as a people. So they were not free to evolve and develop their culture, their language, their arts in an open and free manner. And in fact, what had happened is that without political power and political clout, without a civil society, without appropriate political structures to safeguard their language and culture, that job or that task fell basically by default to the church, the Ukrainian church, which mostly was Orthodox up until a couple of centuries ago, when the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was formed. But in effect, the Ukrainian church became the de facto protector of Ukrainian language, culture, and traditions. Because there was no other way to do it. They were the only organization that had the capabilities to do so. And this was reinforced by the fact that, frankly, for most of Ukrainians' history, the only people that were truly educated, that could read, write, that were literate, that were cultured, were the clergy. So the Ukrainian language, culture, and art became inextricably linked with the Ukrainian church. I use this kind of globally, both the Orthodox and the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And now, even though circumstances have changed, the church can't disentangle itself from that historical role as the protector of Ukrainian language and culture. And this is both good and bad. I mean, obviously it's good in that that's a task that is necessary in terms of a nation or an ethnic group to be able to continue to evolve and develop. Yet in our current situation, where Ukraine is a free nation and where we have large diasporas living in ostensibly free and democratic countries where they are able to practice their language, their culture, their whatever without too much hindrance, it becomes a bit of a problem in that one would think that now that they are able to freely do so, that there's no need any longer for the church to be that protector of culture and tradition and language, and yet it continues to do so. Not necessarily because it wants to. I've had a number of conversations over the years with priests and bishops, etc., where they would really love to see the church get back to its primary task, which is the religious life, the spiritual life of their community. And a lot of the energy and the time and the finances of the church are still being dedicated towards this historical role of protecting the language and the culture. And it's continuing to do so not only in the diaspora, but in Ukraine as well, where we see that however much we would like it to be otherwise, church and state can't seem to coexist, in their separate spheres. So I think when we examine, this kind of conflict, and I use the term hesitantly, between the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the social political reality within which it's situated, I think we've got to look upon the situation in Ukraine and in the diaspora separately, because we have a different dynamic. In Ukraine, throughout most of the communist era and even throughout the last 2 decades, the church continued out of necessity to play that role as a kind of defender of the Ukrainian legacy, the Ukrainian heritage, because neither the communists nor the oligarchs that ran Ukraine for the last 2 decades were particularly interested in preserving Ukrainian language and culture. And in fact, just the opposite. So even up until this past year, it was still a very necessary kind of task to fulfill. The church was still a defender of the Ukrainian identity, as opposed to the dominant state-supported Moscow Patriarchate Church, which was trying to basically take Ukrainians and make them into new Russians, or Little Russians, which was their historical strategy, which never worked, but never stopped them from trying. In Canada and the U.S., you have a little bit of a different situation. Here, we as Ukrainians are allowed to be Ukrainians, whatever that means to us from a cultural, artistic, musical, language perspective. So there isn't really that same necessity for the church to be the historical protector and defender of the Ukrainian identity, yet it continues to do so. And it's not because they necessarily want to, but it's because a lot of the people, the parishioners that belong to the church, be it the Ukrainian Greek Catholic or Ukrainian Greek Orthodox, almost insist upon it, particularly the older generations, the ones that came over as immigrants, and even the first generation or two of Ukrainians born in Canada that were affected a lot by the thinking of their immigrant parents, that, the Ukrainian church was where they learned the Ukrainian language, that, they had the Ridna Shkolas there, and the whole ceremony had to be in the Ukrainian language, that any attempts to impose the English language on church services or church operations was always met with a lot of resistance. And most Ukrainian parishes, be they Catholic or Orthodox, I think find it very uncomfortable when the church, their quote Ukrainian church, goes out and tries to attract new parishioners that are not, quote, Ukrainian, which theoretically that should not be an issue. The church is a church is a church. A Christian church is out to proselytize. It's out there to spread the word of God to anybody and everybody, regardless of language, culture, whatever. Yet most Ukrainian parishes very jealously guard their identity as being a Ukrainian church, which is, I guess, interesting from the point of view that if you go back to the original apostolic origins, the whole thrust was to spread the word amongst everybody, all the Gentiles, regardless of language or whatever. So the Ukrainian church historically has been this insular body that has been very strongly tied to the Ukrainian identity within which it operated, and continues to do so. Do we really need Ukrainian churches, Ukrainian Orthodox churches, as opposed to Orthodox churches, period? I guess that would be a matter of some debate, and I would hazard a guess a very heated debate amongst a lot of people. Some of that has started to happen, but only peripherally, and I think that will become more and more of an issue as what we find is happening in Canada and the U.S. is that a lot of long-time Ukrainian churches, be they Orthodox or Catholic, are closing down. Like the parishioners, as the older ones fade away, the newer generations aren't replacing the ranks, and the overall number of people that profess to being Ukrainian Greek Catholic or Ukrainian Greek Orthodox is shrinking year by year by year. Yet any attempt by the church clergy or the hierarchy to expand the parishioners by broadening the base beyond Ukrainians is met with a lot of resistance. It's a very difficult dilemma, I would think, for the church fathers, and one that will give them many headaches for the years to come.